Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of On Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz. Welcome. And I'm also pleased to welcome to tonight's show three folks who have never been here before, but we hope and pray this will not be their first and only time here. So to my right is Kerry Hoops. She is an MA and a board-certified behavior analyst, and you are the clinic director of the WEAP Autism Learning Center. And so if you hadn't figured it out yet, our show is about autism, and we're going to spend the entire hour chatting about that. And next to Kerry is Jamie Schuh. He is a managing therapist and the assistant clinic director. And next to Jamie is Vanessa Knippel. You are also an MA, and you are a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Correct, yes.
I got it all right. Okay. So, well, welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
And so I've given your names and titles now, but why don't we share a little about each of your experiences, and then we want to talk about what WEAP is, and so you can explain the acronym and that kind of thing. So why don't we start then with you, Kerry? What's your background?
Okay. Well, I've been working with children with autism for 24 years.
Okay.
I started when I was in undergrad at UWGB and decided on my major in psychology and wanted to find something in the field. And I found a job working with two children with autism, and I fell in love with it. I loved seeing the daily gains and working through the challenges, and I loved how each family was unique and different. And then when I wanted to make my career, I found WEAP, our Wisconsin Early Autism Project. And the reason why I switched over to WEAP was I believe the clinical integrity and the fact that they were researching treatment and the effectiveness of their treatment. And I went back to school after working at WEAP and got my master's in applied behavior analysis from Ball State. And I've worked my way all the way up to director. I'm regional director of the Green Bay region. I'm also the president of the Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin. And I've been on the board of directors for over 8 years, and it just makes me feel good that I'm connecting with all ages of the spectrum.
Sure. Okay. Excellent. Very good. Jamie, how about you?
I took a little different path here. I have a master's degree in history, so naturally I ended up working with kids with autism, like everybody else, right? But I had been in education, and I started this as a part-time job. So I started at our entry-level position, and the thing that really just got me right away was the see a problem, fix a problem. It didn't matter what that problem was, we would try to address it, try to come up with that solution. So, I really liked it and kind of switched over to doing this full-time, and then eventually I also went back to school to get board certified as a assistant behavior analyst so that I could move into, to the MT role. And as a managing therapist, my job is kind of coordinate that team. So, I'll work a lot with the parents to see what do they want out of therapy, and, are we, hitting the goals that they want us to work on. I choose the programming for the children, and, if we are dealing with, some behaviors we'd like to see change, then I'm, working on that piece too. Like, how do we make behavior change happen? And then managing the staff and doing my best to supervise them and make sure that everybody feels supported and has the knowledge to and the tools to be successful in that job.
Okay. Vanessa?
And I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have just about 10 years experience working with children, autism, teens, children, adults on the spectrum as well too. I got my bachelor's here at UWO actually in psychology, my master's in marriage and family therapy at the University of San Diego. And in my current role, I kind of work in a variety of different capacities. I do diagnostic evaluations, so kind of identifying autism in younger children. I also do mental health outpatient counseling, and then also involved in some of that ABA treatment as well too.
Okay, great. Well, I'm very happy to, as I said earlier, have all three of you here. And it's interesting, Vanessa, that they're always talking about how do we keep people who are going to school here,
Yeah.
how do we keep them here? And you left to go further your education in a nice, warm, sunny
Beautiful.
climate, and then you came back.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you came back, and I'm sure people at UWO and in all areas
Yeah.
of business are happy that you came back too. But what would prompt you to come back here from San Diego?
The weather? No.
Especially this time of year.
To be honest with you, I just love the Midwest. I just think there's something about the people here that it's hard not to love. And so it's just a great place to live. I love fall. I mean, it was, San Diego's beautiful, but there's nothing like Wisconsin. So.
Well, that is true. And I think the quality of life here is so much, it's so much different, and yet it's so much better in many ways. And not to knock San Diego, but, we are blessed here to have a relatively low crime rate, especially violent crime. And so if you can deal with the weather, the 4 months or so out of the year that we have bad weather, it's a great place to be. So, all right. Well, we want to talk about, what WEAP is, and it is, as you before mentioned, Kerry, it stands for Wisconsin Early Autism Project. And now let's talk a little bit about, WEAP's progression and how it sort of has evolved.
Sure. So WEAP has been around for well over 25 years. It started with Dr. Sallows. He trained out in UCLA with Dr. Lovas, who was the first person to research the effectiveness of ABA treatment for young children with autism. And then he came to Wisconsin and brought the treatment to Wisconsin, but Wisconsin didn't have funding at the time for families to access treatment. And so he did a lot, if not most of the lobbying to help us get the funding that we have today, which is fantastic. And it has gone through multiple varieties of accessing that funding, whether it was through a waiver system where sometimes families had to wait like up to 2 years to access treatment, to the way it is right now, where kids can get a diagnosis and move right into treatment very quickly, and that's really what they need. So I think that it's just really respectful, how he really focused on getting that funding for the state. He also replicated the research that Lovas did out in UCLA and found similar results. And so they were seeing that Lovas saw 47% and Dr. Sallows found 48% of the kids were able to bridge that developmental gap when they were receiving that early intervention treatment. They were able to function in classrooms without significant support, and their adaptive skills were up to par. So, they were toileting and, feeding themselves and doing everything that they needed. And that was the big reason, I think I said that in my intro, of what brought me to WEAP is that fact, that clinical integrity piece, that curriculum, that he provided. He did retire in 2018, and so he did sell WEAP to Learn Behavioral, which is a nationwide provider. So we service, I know it's over 13 states, but I can't be quoted on how many states because it is ever changing. But I find that Learn is very similar to those values of WEAP, where they're also continually looking at research. ABA is a young field, and it's ever evolving, and we're always learning. And so I think Learn is always looking at what's the upcoming research, what's important, and we're really focusing a lot right now on and have always, but assent-based treatment. So making sure that our kids are buying into treatment and that they're motivated. We're finding those things that they're interested in that makes them want to come over and engage in some of the activities. And I think that's it's just really important to continue to evolve with the research.
Sure. You had mentioned ABA a couple of times, and I don't think that, I know that I don't know what that is, and I would bet that most of our listeners and viewers don't know what that is either. What is ABA?
ABA, it stands for Applied Behavior Analysis,
Okay.
and it's a theory of learning where you're looking at all behavior happens for a reason. So whether positive or negative, so we want to make sure that we know why behaviors are happening. And then it's following behaviors that you want to increase with a positive experience. You're more likely to engage in that behavior again. And if there are negative behaviors or problem behaviors that are getting in the way of learning, we want to know why they're happening and what can we do with that environmental context, or what can we teach, how can we teach that child to communicate their needs in that regard. So it's really a theory of learning, but looking at behaviors to increase and decrease.
Sure, and like most things, I would assume that it is growing and changing and evolving over time, isn't
Yes.
it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's never ending, really.
No, it's never ending.
I want to, I want to talk about the new center that we have here in town, but I think before we get to that, I'm just going to be real perfectly honest here, as I always am, and I'm just going to say, I don't know how to recognize autism in a person. And I don't think I'm alone in that position. You know, there are a lot of emotional, I'm trying to be very politically correct here, and I may not be, but there are a lot of emotional and physical challenges that people, including children, have. And, you know, how do you recognize autism as truly being autism, as opposed to perhaps something else that may be affecting their development and that kind of thing? Who wants to field that?
I think Vanessa. I think that's a Vanessa question.
Yes, no, you make a really good point. There's a quote, I don't know who said it, but that if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism, because it does look different in every individual. There isn't going to be this exact replication of what you're going to expect to see, but what we do know, there's certain kind of criteria of what would be considered autism. And when looking at a diagnosis for young children, really you're kind of teasing out other possibilities, right? Like you always want to look at the full picture. It's not okay, like this checks the box, this is autism. It's what is going on, what does this look like at home, what does this interaction look like at school, but also we kind of look at the criteria. So typically autism is kind of separated into two pieces. There's difficulties with like social communication and social reciprocity. So that could look like, what does play look like? Is there back and forth interaction and exchange? What about, engaging in a conversation or communicating with peers or parents? That kind of falls under that category. But then the second component of autism is kind of the presence of like restrictive or like repetitive patterns of behavior, kind of restricted interests, like things that seem to be sometimes a little inflexible, maybe some like repetitive play. So when looking at autism in young children, that's really kind of we're looking at that criteria, but also kind of like you said, teasing apart, making sure this isn't just a developmental delay, isn't anything else going on. You really want to make sure you're looking at that full picture.
Are there tests that you can do, or something else? How do you actually go? I guess what I'm asking is, how do you go about diagnosing autism in a child?
I always say first and foremost, like talk to your pediatrician, right? That's the best first step, is talk to your pediatrician, do that checkup. A lot of the times at the pediatrician's office, they'll give you, like a screener. They have those available that are just a way to kind of, okay, are the normal developmental milestones being met? And that's a great kind of starting point. But then as far as like the diagnostic process, there are certain tests that you can use to identify symptoms of autism. Some are more play-based. I think those tests are considered like the gold standard. They're the best. We want to see how a child plays, how they interact. At least, at WEAP, that's our process. We use some what are considered like the best tests out there for autism. And then there's some that look at the parent's experience. What do they observe at home? Because that's important as well too, right? Like what you see in the testing appointment might not always look the same as what you see at home. And so it really helps kind of gather that full picture.
Okay, excellent. So in my doing some research for this show, And by the way, you guys supplied wonderful questions. So I know you were busy on a vacation, but I'm sure that you gave some input as to what was put together here. So I want to thank you guys for really a stellar job putting these questions together. But I did come up with some on my own. And in doing some research, I found something that sometimes autism is referred to as autism spectrum disorder. Now, what is that, and how does that differ from just autism, or are they one and the same?
They're the same, and it's kind of, as Vanessa referenced earlier, if you know one kid with autism, you know one kid with autism. Mm-hmm. Autism definitely doesn't show the same for everybody. So when we talk about that spectrum, and actually Vanessa had a good resource once, it's not from left to right, but it's like a circle. So there are, different areas of like your ability to, say some sensory inputs might be very disturbing to you, and that might show up high, that there's a big deficit there. But then in other areas, like maybe social communication, maybe there's not so much. So it's a very, fluid thing. So it's not like either you're totally severe or you're not. It really does kind of, we see a lot of different sort of behaviors, a lot of different patterns throughout the different kids. The different children I work with, in a lot of ways, it's hard to think that it's all in the same thing because there's such a difference between the kids we work with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have a new learning and treatment center here in Oshkosh, and it opened this past summer. There was a grand opening and a ribbon cutting, and why don't you tell us a little bit about where it's located and how long you've actually been operating? And then we've got some pictures, and we've got a really nice video that you guys sent. So we'll show the video, and then we'll show some pictures. But how long have you been in operation, and where is the center located?
Well, we did open our doors in July. We have been servicing Oshkosh for a long time, so for 25 years, but this is our first opening of facility for families.
Okay.
It's on Universal Street, so off of Highway 44.
Okay.
Just, I think, about a mile west of the highway in that business park. And
go ahead.
Okay. I was like, are you looking at what business park? Because I don't know.
I'm trying to picture it in my mind. I kind of know where the business park is. So Verve Credit Union is out there, not to give them a plug.
Yeah, we're across the street.
You're across the street. Okay.
Yeah, across Universal.
On the same side of the highway?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So if you know where Verve's corporate headquarters are, that's where you guys are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we found this beautiful building. It's 2905 Universal Street. It's a beautiful building, and the setup, when we saw it, could not be more perfect for a learning center. When you walk in the center, it's warm and welcoming. There's a fireplace, which doesn't sound like what you would typically have, but it just has that warm, homey, family feel when you walk in. And then it splits into two different pods, which works out really nicely for us. So when you go over to the right side, we have more classrooms. So we really want to work on our kids getting ready for school and making sure that they have all the tools that they need. And so in the center of that pod, there's it's kind of hard to explain. There's like a 3/4 length wall that surrounds it. It almost looks like a roller rink from like the 80s.
Oh, I remember those.
So, but inside we have a classroom, and that's for basically our 3 to 5 year olds. So they can practice with circle time, and we have sensory tables, a dress up station, a book corner where they can read, and then different centers and different things like that they can play. Where we run classes. We have a smaller classroom that's for 18 months to about 3 years old, where they're just getting started and learning how to be in the same room with each other and having snacks and that kind of thing together. And coming soon, we have a smart board classroom that's really going to get that feel of being in school. They're a little bit backordered right now, but we should get that
supply
shortly,
chain problems,
right? That actually played quite a role in putting the center together. So we have those classrooms, but then also surrounding it, we have individual treatment rooms where mostly there would be typically about 2 to 4 kids having therapy in those rooms. So it's a little bit smaller, where you can focus a little bit more attention on learning those skills, and then they can generalize that out into those classrooms when they go into the classroom. The other pod is more, we have it set up, it's identical, so it has the roller rink, but that's more of our gym. And so we have some movement space, and it's just nice and open for them to run around. And then we have more treatment rooms in that.
Okay. So how large of an area do you guys have?
I think it's 11,000 square feet.
Oh, that's a nice size.
It's a very nice size. It can probably fit, I would say, over 50 clients.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Great.
And also coming soon, we have a playground that's going to be out the side of the building.
Okay.
Which we're very excited about, where we'll have a nice playground structure so that they can transition out and get that recess feel as well. And there's also a cafeteria for them to practice lunch and eating together.
Do they bring their own lunch, or do you guys provide? Okay.
Yeah, they bring their own lunch.
Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and take a look at that video now. I think it's about a 2-minute video, so we can take a look at that now, and guys in the booth or in the control room can kill our mics so that if we want to converse, we can do that. But go ahead and roll that video.
We have been servicing Oshkosh and the Fox Cities for over 25 years. And we want to see our children succeed in their transitions into school. And this center is really going to help provide that resource for the community.
I've been in the field working with children with autism now for nearly 30 years. But the moment I saw this floor plan, I knew it was absolutely ideal. We didn't really have to do anything to it. It's quite amazing.
We're just doing lots and lots of celebrations here at the center, whether a child's saying their first word or using the toilet independently for the first time.
It's just wonderful to see the children here, knowing what we can provide.
My son has been in WEAP for almost about 2 years now. He started here at the center back in July when they first opened up. We absolutely love it here. My son has done an amazing job. The technicians, the staff, everybody has done an awesome job. He has progressed so much within the last 2 years. I never thought in a million years that he would be able to have a conversation with me. And seeing his behavior with other children now compared to before I got him diagnosed has been amazing. So without them, I don't know where we would be or how he would be. So I really appreciate everything that WEAP has done for us.
What we're bringing to Oshkosh is a center where we can celebrate success.
All right, that's a great video. That really is very, very well done. And congratulations on the facility that you have. So let's take a look at some of the pictures now, and maybe as we're watching them, you can explain to us what it is that we're seeing. So let's put up the first one. We're seeing me.
This is Cheryl.
I haven't been to the facility yet, but I hope to at some point.
You're welcome to come.
Okay. Well, there we go. There's our first picture, and I think that's just sort of a recap of what we saw in the video.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go on to the next one. Santa, very present and prominent there in the middle.
This is actually in our gym. That one was the gym. This is our ducklings classroom.
Ducklings classroom.
Yeah, so that's
okay, so explain what a duckling classroom is.
That would be our 18-month to roughly about 3 years of age, so our little kiddos.
And what is that what's in the foreground there, that wooden thing that looks like it's kind of a...
It's a boat.
Okay.
Yeah, it rocks. So
I was going to say, it
like
kind of
a
reminded me
teeter-totter.
of a little teeter-totter
A little
type
safer
thing.
teeter-totter, yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that's a boat. Okay. So from 18 months to how old?
Typically 3 years, and that's give or take. We really are looking at developmental level versus, chronological age, but it's typically our early learners.
Okay. And next? Oh, this looks fun. What is this?
This is our gym. Yeah, and lots of rainbow in there.
Yeah, for sure. And it almost reminds me, because I'm a dog person, those tube things, they remind me of some agility equipment. What are the upside down, I'm going to relate it again to dog dishes, because they kind of look like my dog's dishes. We don't have multicolored, but
They're for balance, so they're squishy, and you can
Okay.
stand on them. I think they're actually supposed to be the other way around, but I'm not 100% sure.
can we go back? Guys, can we just go back to that? There we go.
Yeah.
So the colored things on the floor that look flat, what are those?
Those, they can be used for multiple things. It could be used in a circle time where, go sit on the green square, go sit on or they're not squares, they're circles.
Yeah.
I teach shapes. No.
I was going to say, I'd even have a tough time finding a green square in that one.
No, you can use them for multiple things. This is really set up like an obstacle course in
Sure.
here, but they can also be used as markers, or if you're practicing lining up, it just gives a more clear visual of where you're supposed to be.
Okay. All right. Now we can move on to the next one. Now, this looks a lot like a lot of fun. I see a whole bunch of fish. What's this all about?
That's the big rug for our circle time. So if you can see the calendar on the wall, so that's where a teacher would be by that orange wall, and going through calendar and some story times.
Oh, there's a much
that's
better
a nice
picture.
Yeah, that's a nice
a
view
better
of it.
picture. And so there are children sitting on each one of the fish, or tell us how that works right there.
It's set up to have a variety of different means to be used. So we don't have that many children sitting in there. I would say in a classroom we would probably have about 5 roughly students in the classroom at a time. But they could sit on a different color, they could go to a different number depending on their level. And so just kind of fun. I mean, really bought it because it was colorful and fun, to be honest.
Yeah. And then there's a magazine rack there.
Yes.
I swear you guys are the only ones with a magazine rack anymore because of COVID.
It's a bookshelf.
It's a bookshelf. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
So there's different centers. There are different toys that
Yeah.
it can engage in. So you see a little bit of table. There's like a sensory bin where they can play with like some sand and those sorts of things. And there's like a block center, and then the house. So there's different activities that we'd want to see them, engage in over time, so that they're getting a good variety of experience there and ready when they get to school.
And in front of the bookshelf, I don't know if the other picture shows it any more clear, but it looks like a rug that you could maybe build stuff on or something.
It's a foam. It's a foam mat.
Okay.
And I think that one has numbers on it.
Okay.
And just something squishy so that they can sit if they're going to be looking at a book. Or the floor is actually squishy itself, so it is rubber flooring in our gym and in our classrooms, which is just nice.
Well, and I'm sure it helps if a child accidentally falls too, or an adult. In my case.
Yeah. Well, and adults are sitting on the floor, as they're working with the kids, and the rubber flooring actually helps.
Sure.
for comfort for them.
Okay. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. What are we seeing here?
This would be one of the treatment rooms. So this treatment room would have, this is before our tables because of the supply chain, but now we have tables in them. But you would have roughly about 3 to 4 kids per room, and we have the various toys that they're sharing the toys. They will have their tables where they can go to the table and do some work time, whether it's coloring or answering some questions or whatever it is that they're working on at the time. And so sometimes the kids will play all together in the center of the room, and then they may go to the table for their learning activities and then come back together and play.
Okay. Do we have another photo? I can't remember if we do or not. We do not. So it's back to us. So let's talk about the ages that you guys are actually treating at your facility here in Oshkosh. 18 months was the youngest probably that you have. And that's actually amazing to me that you can diagnose a child with autism at 18 months of age. I think that's pretty remarkable, really. What's the oldest that you would be able to treat?
Our children coming in to treatment are typically the 18 months to roughly about 4 years, but we do service children in general, I want to say around 6 years, but it all depends based on the family's needs, the child's needs, because we do have children up to 8 or 9, but typically getting started, we're looking at that early intervention piece. So getting started is 18 months to 4.
Well, and I know that was, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was, the importance of early intervention and utilizing therapy at those early ages. Was there anything else that you wanted to add about that, either one of you? Or?
Yeah, the early intervention is key. We just know that young brains learn better than older brains. So there's a concept called brain plasticity, which just says that your brain's open for new things at that early age. So that's why we want to take advantage of that. So Kerry referenced earlier, at times there was a 1.5 to 2 year delay to get into treatment. That was really unfortunate because we weren't able to take advantage of that. So fortunately now we're able to move those kiddos in faster, and it really helps a lot because they are in that prime learning area.
Sure.
And the other side of things, the challenging behaviors aren't as deeply ingrained. They don't have as long of a learning history of some of those things working for them, so it's easier to change those behaviors we'd like to see change in. So it is definitely a key piece, is getting started early.
Do you guys work at all with the local schools, or in particular the Oshkosh area public school system?
We do when our children are receiving services through the school. We're not directly connected, but we do coordinate services with birth to 3, with the school system, with private therapies like speech and occupational therapy.
Yeah. Do you ever get, I know that sometimes a parent might have, for whatever reason, they may have a concern or a fear about reaching out to you guys. Do you ever have a school reach out to you and say, we have a student that may have some autism issues? Does that ever happen? Or is it really something where the parents are the conduit for getting that child into treatment?
Within our region, yes, we have had schools reach out and ask questions, but it is more initiated by the parent.
Sure. Well, thinking about that then, what fears do parents sometimes express to you about why maybe they didn't call sooner, or just sort of expressing, hey, I figured I better do this because I love my child and their well-being is important to me, but these are my concerns. What are you hearing about their concerns? What are they?
I think it's always a toss-up as a parent, right? You want to hope for the best, and you want to okay, let's wait it out, let's see. And all kids go through stages where they can go through different bouts or different have skills pop up, or kind of every kid develops at a different rate as well too. But then on the flip side, the longer you wait to receive services. Really that early intervention piece is that important part. And I think there's some hesitation of, you never want to receive bad news. I think it can be a hard it can be a hard process to kind of go through. Okay, now my child receives this diagnosis, what next? And I think that can sometimes be a barrier, and a very understandable one, to be honest. That's why I always kind of go back, talk to your pediatrician. If you have concerns, sometimes they're concerns, but they work themselves up through normal development, and other times not. And I think that's the important part about reaching out and talking to your doctor, or making a call, checking in, because then that way you can identify it early if it isn't just, a kind of typical developmental, hiccup that goes on.
Sure. Yeah, well, and, just even kids who don't have autism, they too develop at different rates.
Absolutely.
And different things that happen in our lives affect us all differently. I know that when, oh gosh, I'm trying to think how old I was. I was maybe 11 or 12 when my maternal grandmother passed away, and that affected me greatly, to the point where it then triggered some problems with my doing schoolwork, and I was only in elementary school. I hadn't yet entered junior high, which is now middle school. I can't quite get to the point of calling it middle school. It was junior high, but so that affected me, and I'm sure that kids have all kinds of things that affect them, and then if you've got autism on top of that,
right,
it just creates another layer of problems.
I think a lot of parents too will often say, after their child receives a diagnosis, they'll say, I knew as early as 6 months, I knew, but there's maybe not as many signs, or they couldn't quite put their finger on it. And I always, say, follow your instinct as a parent. I think parents are the people who know their children best. So really just follow your gut, and don't be afraid to ask questions or reach out to your pediatrician or to a provider, ask questions. They'll be able to help guide you, and just follow your intuition as a parent.
Sure. So who pays for your services then for these kids? Is it covered by insurance or? Okay.
It's covered by insurance and Medicaid, and there's a program also called Katie Beckett, which helps families who have a diagnosis to access Medicaid.
Katie Beckett?
Katie Beckett.
Is that a person's name?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Katie Beckett was the one that initiated. Yeah. I'm not a Katie Beckett expert, but I know that.
I'm not either, so I'll just call it the Katie Beckett program, and then Medicaid and private insurance.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that you guys would like to address about the stages of development that they're receiving at your treatment center before we move on to something else?
I guess, just for each of our kids, it is very individualized program. So it's not one treatment for everybody. It really depends upon what they need. So, as kids grow in our program, of course, our programming changes to meet that. And we try to work closely with the parents to see what, again, they want from us. And as kids grow, they have different needs, as you can imagine. So, our goals for self-help and stuff change, obviously, as they grow. We try to look at those developmental milestones and make sure our kids are catching up to those milestones.
Sure.
As Kerry said before, we're usually looking at bridging the gap, because when they come to us, they are behind their typically developing peers, and our goal is to try to get them caught up. So by the time they're entering that school system, hopefully they're right there with their peers.
Sure. In one of the pictures we saw, or maybe in a couple of them we saw, it was like a reading area. And I know that for kids who are, maybe they're challenged with respect to reading or whatever, the library, I don't actually know who sponsors this program, but it's Read to a Dog program, and it's usually done at libraries, but I have heard of it being done in schools, where children read to a dog, and they're able to overcome some of their problems and their inhibitions about reading and so forth. And a dog is a great thing to read to. I even sometimes, I talk to my dogs all the time. I don't know that I read to them, but we watch TV together.
I've never heard of that. That sounds really cute.
I did that with one of my clients.
Oh, you've never heard of Read to a Dog program?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
it was started out in, I believe it was started out in Colorado.
Okay.
It's you should look it up.
Okay,
It's really a very interesting thing. So, since you've never heard of it, I think that answers my question. I was going to say, do you guys ever do like a Read to a Dog program at your facility? But apparently not.
Nope.
One of my clients, we went to a shelter and did that.
Okay.
That's cool.
The shelter here in Oshkosh? Or
It was a different city, but yeah.
Okay. All right. And how did it go?
It was great, except I was allergic to the cats.
Oh, no.
So after about an hour, I was like, we got to go.
Oh, jeez. Well, see, next time you'll know to take something like Allegra
but
or
it was
whatever
really
before
good.
you
You know,
go.
like it was, the right environment for him to, to do that, and it made it fun for him.
Yeah.
So it was a success.
Yeah, it's really a phenomenal program. It really is. Okay, so let's talk about what the diagnosis program looked like. I think we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but let's get into more depth. And I think, Vanessa, this is your baby, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important part, I guess, to mention, we covered some of it, but is just it's a really, I think, more relaxing experience than I think what parents probably anticipate. I think you hear the word like diagnostic and testing, and it seems a little bit scary, but at least here at WEAP, the testing process we use is very play-based. It's set up to really kind of highlight, okay, what skills does this child have, and then identify where those areas of concerns are, but we really want to try to get the, best kind of sample of what this child's experience is. And so it's play-based, there's toys, there's bubbles, there's foam rockets. I'm pretty sure I moved the entire time jumping around that room. But then also time for the parents to really share their experience and what their concerns are, because like I said, what we see during a 2-hour appointment is going to look very different than probably what the parents see at home or what happens at school. And so we really try to give the parents as much time and get as much information from them on their child, because they're really, the people who know their child best. I think a less intimidating process than probably what parents think of before they call.
Sure. Well, I like the fact that it's all play-based.
Yeah.
I think that's best for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And the social component of the diagnosis, right, is looking at those social skills. So that's really what we want to assess. So we're going to get down on the floor and blow bubbles and play blocks.
Oh, that's cool. Stuff I'd like to do. So, all right, I'm going to throw another one at you here. Since we talked a little bit about Read to a Dog program, there's an equine therapy place just on the outskirts of Oshkosh. It's called, it was right on the tip of my tongue, and it's just gone now. I just had it. Oh boy. Well, in any event, I'm not going to think of it if I sit here and try really hard.
That always happens.
Beaming. There we go. That's what it's called. And so, but I don't think, beaming is great, I think, for people with PTSD and older youth who have autism issues. But I don't think the young ages that you're dealing with would, well, I don't know. I don't speak for them, so I don't know. But is that something that you've ever heard of, like, not so much with this facility here because you're only 6 or 7 months old here, but in other areas of the country or up in the Green Bay area, has there ever been kind of any equine therapy that?
I spent a lot of time, when I was in California, there was a lot of therapy with horses and animals. But I think what's really neat about what we do at WEAP is it's really tailored to each individual child. So if that child's interest is horses or puppies, whatever that is, that's what we're going to use in therapy to really get that child engaged, bring them out. And so, I'm a big believer in, if that's what helps that child progress and learn and get excited, that can have value to it, whether that's horses or dogs or, I could list a million other kind of crazy things we've seen come in, but if that's what trips or trigger, let's do it. Let's rock it.
Yeah, sure. Well, and of course there's liability issues with a lot of that stuff, with horses and dogs and so forth. But I just think that kids and animals kind of go hand in hand. I know at least they did for me when I was growing up. So
I will welcome puppies in the clinic any day if that's an option.
But not a horse in the clinic, right?
She's like, can we get a WEAP cat? But then Jamie couldn't come to work, so.
Maybe a horse out in that new playground area. Maybe you can have a stable out there.
Yeah.
So what's an example of a goal that a child might work on, whether it's individually or with their parents' help?
Example, I'm just starting a new kiddo, and the parents were pretty clear. One of the things they want to work on is potty training, and that's not a surprise, right? Everybody wants to get there. So that's a goal for us. For this child, actually, specifically, it's initiating potty, and so we have a plan of how we're going to go about that, and try to build on that goal and work with the parents. So. This particular family, we're looking at doing a mix of in-home and in-center, which I think is a great, because we get to see, how things look in the home, which is obviously very important, but then we also get that center where we get to do the peer stuff, which, is obviously very important, because as Vanessa mentioned, it's, social deficits are sometimes part of this, and we want to build those social skills. So again, really depends upon the kiddo as to what those goals are. And, our goal definitely is to have the parents take part in that. And if the child happens to be in school, that the school is on, everybody on the same page. That's the way we're most likely to make the best, get the best outcomes for our kids.
Yeah, I was going to say, because parents play a huge role in all of our lives, no matter, whether we have challenges or not, or whether we're 4 or 14. I mean, even as adults, we're learning from our parents, so they play an important role. And what is the role that the parents play in this kind of treatment program, or it's center-based?
Oh, when it's center-based? The parents will receive daily updates from their team, just to identify how well things are going, what are areas that we may need a little bit more support on, things like that. We have weekly team meetings where the parents would meet with a couple members of the treatment team, and they would take a look at how the programs are going, and just talk about schedule or what's going on at home. Are there any concerns or anything? So they do get that weekly meeting. And then with their board certified behavior analysts, they can access a family treatment guidance, which can be weekly as well, where they're targeting goals outside of treatment, such as sleep routines. That's a pretty common eating, focusing on eating a variety of foods. Potty training, of course, is very important, and whatever areas that they're looking at. So the BCBA will help them identify goals that they can work on outside of treatment as well.
When a child enters a treatment program such as what you folks are offering, how long is the typical treatment program or treatment plan? And I'm sure it varies from child to child and case to case, but on average, what would you say the typical amount of time is that a child and their family would spend in this kind of a treatment situation?
I would say it depends on the age that they start, but I would say 2 to 4 years would be fairly average. And then we reassess goals every 6 months. So, that's continually evolving, because when we're starting, at 6 months, they might be at a different place than we thought when they started, and so we continually reevaluate those goals.
Sure. What I am curious, what are some of each of your favorite parts of the treatment center? Because the whole thing looks fun to me.
I like recess. I like the playground.
Oh, don't we all?
I know we don't have it yet, but in De Pere, because I'm from De Pere, but when I go to the De Pere Learning Center, I always love going out for recess and playing with the kids and playing tag or hide and seek and that piece of it. I love that we have that opportunity, a fenced-in, safe place where they can enjoy the outdoors.
I'm continually 6 at heart, so like the gym is my thing. We've got one of those parachutes, where you do the and popcorn with the balls. Like if you can't get into that, that's a good day, right? That's work, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Vanessa,
a good
what
thing.
about you?
Mine's a toss-up. I love, I'm going to say the scooters in the gym as well, too, are so much fun and a really great leg workout. But I also love like the little cubbies that they have. So there's little cubbies at each of the centers with like a little hook for their coats and their hats, and a top cubby for their lunch and their boots. And I just think it's such a cool experience for the kids to practice and feel confident doing the things that they're going to have to do when they get to kindergarten. And you can just see the smile on their face when they like did it all by themselves, or they hang their little cubby up, or they know where their name is, like, because they recognize it now. And I just always feel like that's a heartwarming thing to see.
Sure. Well, we can't have a conversation without a discussion about COVID-19. We're taping this on the 17th of February. A month from now, we will be entering our third year of dealing with COVID-19 and all the various variants that have come with that. And at the beginning of COVID-19, of course, there were major supply chain issues. Then everything kind of got better, and now we're having supply chain issues that are related to mandates and this, that, and the other, still related to COVID-19. What kind of a factor, if any, did COVID-19 play in the development of this particular treatment center and learning center, or did it?
It did. The supply chain for sure affected. We were hoping to have everything fully up and running right away in June was our plan, but we didn't get our tables till November.
Oh.
Yeah, so we had cube chairs that we like flipped over and made a table and half a chair. We improvised, and I think it's good for our staff and it's good for our kids, to learn that flexibility. So. The families were so eager to come in. We're like, we'll figure it out. We're going to figure this out. And now we're just missing a few things like the smart board and the playground and things like that. But that did really play a role. Also, when staff or clients, do get exposed to COVID or that does play a role in being able to access the treatment consistently. We do really focus. We have a pre-session screen that they go through their questions every day to make sure that everybody's safe, and we really had to work on shifting our staffing around so that we were limiting the amount of people that people were exposed to.
Sure.
So you didn't work with as many kids, as you did in the past, and we had them more in pods. They could go do all the things together, but they wouldn't cross with that next pod. So that if there was an exposure, we weren't losing the whole center, at one time.
Are you guys masked in your facility or no?
Yes.
You are. And the children too?
No.
Not the kids?
If they can, but staff are masked.
Okay. But it's up to the parents if they want to mask their kids or not.
Right.
And how large of a staff do you have? I'm curious.
Well, in the region, we have about 200, I want to say.
Right.
But that's in northeastern Wisconsin. I would say in the Oshkosh area, probably about 50.
Oh, that's a nice size staff.
I would say.
Yeah. I wasn't I'm surprised. I don't know why, but I wasn't expecting it to be quite that large.
Well, we have about 23 to 25 kids in our center right now, and so it's about half full, so we have room for 25 more. So I thought that's a good start.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if someone's either listening to this on the radio or they're watching this on television and they live in the Oshkosh area, because this goes out on YouTube, and so sorry if you live in California or someplace, you can't come here unless you move here. But if someone's watching or listening to this and they live in this area and they feel that their child either has been diagnosed with autism or they feel that their child has autism, talking to their pediatrician, and then what? Can they just contact you for a tour? What's the next step? What's the next step? Seeing the place and then getting an official diagnosis, or talk to us a little bit about how that works.
Well, they would give us a call, and we have an intake department that would be that first point of contact, and everyone will be in a different position in that process, and so the intake coordinator would identify where they are in the process and then help them access the next steps, whether it's with us or if it's somewhere else, or what do they need to do. If they don't have a diagnosis, they can come in and get a diagnosis. That is in our De Pere Learning Center. So I know we're in Oshkosh, but we're not diagnosing in Oshkosh yet.
Okay.
I say yet. But they can come into the De Pere clinic and get that diagnosis. Otherwise, if they have a diagnosis, then we would review that, and they would most likely be ready to get started.
Yep.
Okay. We're down to about 3.5 minutes left. I told you guys this would go fast. And you've not even thought about the cameras too much, have you guys?
No, just once.
See?
I'm just kidding.
If someone is, they love kids and they're interested in working with you guys at WEAP, what should they do?
I would recommend going to our website,
Okay. And it is?
WEAPautism.com.
Okay, and I think that's what we've been putting up. Actually, I'm sorry, that's not. We've been putting up WIAutism.com. So what is it?
WEAPautism.com.
Oh,
Yep.
that is
Yeah.
correct. Okay, I've also been putting up autismspeaks.org because there's some more information, and that's where I went to do some of my research. So I guess, one of my last remaining questions is if someone has a child who's been diagnosed with autism, where can they go to find autism-friendly services? Say their child needs a haircut, their child needs something else. I mean, can you guys point them in a direction of where to go for some of these services?
I would recommend contacting the Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin.
Okay.
So they currently have an autism-friendly business initiative where businesses are reaching out and they're getting trained in creating a sensory-friendly environment. And so we have a list of all those businesses that are participating in that, but they're also a great resource to just connect to the best places and resources.
Well,
out there.
and that would be a good place for someone who has a family member who's an adult with autism
absolutely.
to go to also. And so that, again, is the Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And there is a Fox Valley chapter in Appleton and Oshkosh, but we're
Oh, okay.
we're affiliated together. We work
Okay.
we work well together.
All right. And, and for people like me or my crew, if we see someone that either we know is autistic or we suspect they might be, what's the best way to talk to them? I mean, we don't talk down to them, right? We don't talk to them in itty bitty baby talk, right? I mean, what's the best way to do that?
Like any other human.
Yeah.
Yep. Like anyone else.
Okay. So even if they're young, if they're really tiny, we might talk to them that way because that's how a lot of people talk to them. So
Correct, yeah.
just don't treat them any differently. Are there any precautions that we should take in talking to them or playing with them, if we see someone on a playground or whatever? Or
You might want to be aware that kids with autism may not respond because of that social deficit.
Okay.
They may be less likely to respond to you. And, I know some families have little stickers on their vehicles saying, you have an autistic child, they may not respond to you in an emergency.
Okay.
So that people are aware of that situation.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And I guess that's going to do it for us. Do you guys need volunteers ever, or no? It's just employees.
It's just employees.
Okay. All right. Then that was an answer that was simple to answer. That was an answer to that you were able to give me very quickly. All right. Well, thank you to all of my guests, Kerry Hoops, Jamie Schuh, Vanessa Knippel. Again, the websites are WIAutism.com and autismspeaks.org, and the facility is located at 2905 Universal Street. What's your phone number out there?
920-338-1610.
Okay, 1610. 920-338-1610. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it so much. And we want you to come back again when you get that playground equipment.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, that's going to do it for us. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.